Sometimes it's hard to face reality. Oh, even though you might get mad at me. Oh, sometimes it's hard to face reality. Don't be afraid.
What's going on YouTube? Logan Oren here, and I'm back with a new video. Now, today is a topic that, if you've watched any of my older videos, you probably watched a video that I did regarding this topic, and, we're talking about the Black Hebrew Israelites. And I watched a video a few days ago, a couple of days ago, actually, and the video wasn't more so about the Black Hebrew Israelites, but they were mentioned in it. But it was more so the concept of whether or not Jesus was black. And, the, if you know my history, you know that my ex wife was we were, when we were together, when we got married, we were the same, we had the same faith, but, several years later, her family started to slide in that direction, and they brought it to my family, to me and my wife, or ex-wife, and, I basically was, I guess you could say, was at first it sounded very enticing. It sounded very appealing, but after diving into more detail about what they believed and their doctrine, it was easy to kind of pull out and pick out the holes in their in their beliefs and their theology. So I I stepped back and I refused to take those steps to towards that. She wanted to follow her family, which is what she had kind of done her whole life, and their whole family kind of did the same thing, faith wise. And so I didn't want to be a part of it. I didn't want my children to be involved in it until I won't get into that whole issue, but because of this, I have come across these things a lot, this whole topic a lot. Now, one of the things that really gets to me when they try to, I guess, support the whole, the Jews are black, or Jesus was black, and the whole 9 yards. There's two things that two specific concepts in scripture that they bring up, and it just drives me crazy whenever they bring it up. And these were, the one, which was Revelation, I think it's 14, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's basically the whole where his head and his hairs were white like wool, white as snow, and they say with the whole feet looked like burnt brass. That was one of the scriptures that they really dive into to say that Jesus was black. And when I hear this used as an excuse or as a piece of evidence to support the idea, it sends me into, I guess if you want to call it trigger mode, you can call it that, but it sends me into a spiral. But another thing that they bring up is, which I want to just talk about today, just to just bring up just legitimate you know issues within the whole concept is, and this in the video where the guys were mentioning it, where that Jesus had to have been black because he went to Egypt when he was born. He fled to Egypt, and he had to hide. The only way that he could have hid amongst the Egyptians was for him to look like the Egyptians. And so, therefore, King Herod would not have been able to find him. And, and I think this was an argument that I made when I was having this discussion with my ex-wife's brother, and who was the person, he was the ringleader that pulled them all into it, which it's I can understand that at the time he was unemployed, and what does it say? The idle mind is the devil's workplace, something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head fully, but you know the scripture that I'm talking about, and that was the time when he was unemployed and he's just basically sitting around. That's where he jumped, where he started to come across videos of these black Hebrew Israelites, and so that's where it kind of came into play. But I remember having a conversation with him, and the same thing, and to me, it seems very logical. So God does tell Mary and Joseph to flee and go to Egypt. But the problem that I have when people bring this up and they use this as an excuse that he had to have looked like the Egyptians. He had to be had you he had to have been able to blend in with the Egyptians. Is that one? Mary and Joseph Mary and Joseph were never told to go to Egypt to hide. And that's where it kind of where for the most part it falls apart, because if you say, okay, yes, Mary and Joseph were going to take Jesus to Egypt and hide, and then that would have then meant that King Herod knew to go to Egypt to find Jesus. And one, it's problematic because there's lots of different reasons why, logical reasons why God would have told Mary and Joseph to go to Egypt. So for one, we've got to at least at the the least, at the basic core, we've got to go to the scripture. So if we go to Matthew, and Matthew 1, which is basically, this is where it talks about where Jesus and is taken by Mary and Joseph to go to Egypt, to flee to Egypt. And while I'm here in Matthew, and this was one of the uh, you know arguments or the discussions that I had with my ex-wife, and she's sitting here, and I'm explaining to her the errors in their theology, and she's they believe that Jesus is the physical son of Mary and Joseph, that Mary and Joseph had physical relations, and then because of that, then they were born. And so I pointed to, well, Matthew 1:25, and where, well, we can go back to 24, Matthew 1:24 and 25, where it says, then Joseph, being aroused from sleep, did as the angel of the Lord commanded him, and took to him his wife, and did not know her till she had brought forth her firstborn son, and he called his name Jesus. So if of course, when it says that he did not know her, of course, that that means that they did not have relations. And so I'm like, well, the scripture says that he did not know Mary until after Jesus was born. And so, but her argument, or her reply to that, was basically that it was added into the scripture, that the Edomites or whoever, evil people, added that into the scripture, and that was not in the original scripture. So let's go to chapter 2. So in Matthew 2, we go to verse 13. We'll start at 13, and it says, now, when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, arise, take the young child and his mother, flee to Egypt, and stay there until I bring you word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. So it says nothing about hiding. It says nothing where they have to go and keep away from anyone. It doesn't say that Herod is going to follow them into Egypt, so they got to make sure they got to stay out of sight. No, it just tells Joseph that take your wife and take Jesus and go to Egypt and stay there until King Herod dies. So then we get into where the Magi come in. So in chapter 2, verse 16, it says, "Then Herod, when he saw that he was deceived by the wise man." So this is where the wise man had basically told Herod that they were seeking this. They were seeking the new king, the king that was born, that was going to be the king of Israel, and so he sent them. All right, he sent them to go find them and then come back and tell. So if we continue to Matthew chapter 2, and let's go to chapter verse 16. This is after the wise men had left. And it says, "Then Herod, when he saw that he was deceived by the wise men," because originally they went to King Herod, we're trying to find the coming king of Israel. We saw his star, and so basically Herod tells the wise man to go find our new king so that I can worship him, and then when you find him, come back and tell me, so that I can go and worship him, and so, but they don't come back, after they see Jesus, a couple years after he was born. They then, they go their own way. They go back to where they were from. And it says, "So then Herod, when he saw that he was deceived by the wise men, because they didn't come back and tell him, he was exceedingly angry. And he set forth and put to death all the male children who were in Bethlehem and in all of its districts," I think the King James version says, in all the coasts. And so basically, uh, he were they were are Herod went out to then kill all of the young males, and it says from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had determined from the wise men. Then was fulfilled that was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, "A voice was heard in Ramah, lamentation, weeping, and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted, because they are no more." Okay, so they go. So King Herod goes out and he just doesn't know where Jesus is, but he knew that he was from, or that he would be born in Bethlehem, because it says, based from the scribes and the priests, the King Herod knew that it was said that in Bethlehem of Judah, for thus is written by the prophet. This is Matthew chapter 2, verse 5. So they said to him, the scribes and the priests, told King Herod, "In Bethlehem of Judah, for thus it is written by the prophet, but you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not the least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." So he knew that the coming king would come from Bethlehem. So that's where he went. That's why he sent his men to Bethlehem. He sent them to Bethlehem, and he had all the males 2 years and under killed, and in the area around Bethlehem. He didn't know to go to Egypt. So he would not have known to go to Egypt to find to find Jesus. So the absurdity that they went to Egypt so that they could hide amongst the people in Egypt is nowhere evident in scripture. That was the whole purpose of going to Egypt. Now, of course, yes, they were hiding in the sense that they were staying out of Israel so that they could not be sought or they could not be found, and Jesus could not have been killed. So yes, that was I guess the extent of hiding, but they just would have been there for that reason. You know, they would have been in Egypt just to get out of or away from Bethlehem and out of Israel so that Jesus could have been kept safe. Now, of course, when, according to what they were told by the angel of the Lord, that once King Herod was dead, then they could come back to Israel, and that's exactly what they did. So King Herod dies, and then they leave and they come back. So if we just look at the basic, I guess, idea of what Scripture says, one, they were not told to go to hide so that they could blend in amongst the people. They were there so that they could just get away because King Herod didn't know where to find them. Okay, so that's reason number one. It's not in Scripture that they were going there to blend in with the people. Okay, number two. Now, the argument is that if he was, let's say, white, European looking or whatever, that he was not, based off of that he had to look like the Egyptians at that time, which would have been, more of a darker skin, or even if we're to say that they were black, the Egyptians were black at that time. If Jesus was not, it would not have mattered if he was in Egypt, because Egypt wasn't like, Egypt was basically like the United States of that time. Egypt was a highly metropolitan, center of the world. They were very diverse. You would have had people of all kinds of ethnicities, colors, everything from nationalities. They would have been blended in with Egyptians because that's what the kind of place that Egypt was. So it would have been, it's not like you would have easily been able, let's say if Jesus was white, now it's not like you would be able to go to Egypt and you would be able to say, go in there and say, hey, we're looking for a family with a white family with a white baby. Where are they? And they're, oh yeah, we saw this family. They came in and they looked like they were Israelites, and so yeah, we saw them here. No, it's not like that was. It would have been that easy because one, Egypt is a very big nation. And the idea that they would have been able to go into a nation as big as Egypt and just be able to find someone like that during that time is ridiculous. Is not likely. But just for the sake of the part of the argument, Egypt was a very diverse place, and you would have not, and it would have been able to easily blend in with the other people because there would have been different kinds of people coming through and living in Egypt and leaving Egypt, that it would have not been something that would have been easily recognizable, that they could come in and go and find where Jesus was. This is not like, that we're talking about he's going from a small town like, like we're going from Texas, and we're in Dallas, and then you are going to go to a small town that's right next door that has like 500 people where everybody knows each other. So if somebody were to come in, you would know that, hey, these new people, they don't belong here, they're new, so yeah, let me go and show you where they were. So it does not make sense to then say that they were trying to blend in just because Egypt was such a diverse place and such a large, diverse nation that would have had millions of people coming in and out of different ethnicities. So that's, number two. Biggest, one of the bigger reasons that kind of would be a reason why God would tell them to go to Egypt. Okay, number three. Now, if you look at the map, okay, here's where Bethlehem is. All right, now Bethlehem is all the way down here, all the way over here. Egypt is all the way down here. So, if this is where Bethlehem is, and King Herod went and he had every, male two and under killed, and the areas around, like he would not have thought, because one, he didn't know to go to Egypt, but two, he would have literally had to go all over through Israel, just killing every young child. But he didn't do that because he knew that he would have come from Bethlehem. All right, and so that's why he went to kill the males in Bethlehem and the areas around it, because those would have been the most likely places that he would be, because he doesn't know, he doesn't think or know that King Herod knows of him and that King Herod would be looking for him. So they would have no reason to think that they would be fleeing. So it just, within all of that, that makes no sense at all, because King Herod does not know that Mary and Joseph knows that King Herod is trying to kill him or kill Jesus. And then the last big thing is that why they would have gone and why it would have made sense to go to Egypt is because here we've got Israel right here. Okay, now Israel has had its share of battles and wars. But I guarantee you that King Herod was not bringing soldiers all the way into the nation of Egypt and bringing soldiers across their borders, killing young children. Because if he had done that, then it would definitely spark a huge war. So King Herod's not coming into Israel, or sorry, King Herod is not coming into Egypt having young children killed. So yes, so they literally wouldn't even need to hide. Now maybe, yes, King Herod could probably work something out with Pharaoh and say, hey, I'm looking for this person. Can you send him back if you find him? Yes, that's possible. But King Herod's not just going to go and have people killed and have people, dead, dying, because he's trying to maintain his crown. So to me, I think that is the most damning reason why you would send him to Egypt, because he would be safe there, because Israel's not coming into, the soldiers are not coming there to harm anybody. That's not, Egypt's not letting Israel in to do that. So even if you try to do it covertly, it's still not happening. You run the risk of bringing an all-out war against Israel. So I just it kills me when people bring up the whole that, in order for him to have gone into Egypt, that he had to be able to blend in with the Egyptians and he had to look like them. No. It's almost like, when I was younger, I used to think this was weird because, me growing up, Egypt, Egypt is in Africa, and, the people from Egypt, people in Africa, have dark skin or black skin. And so when I watched, what's the name of the movie? When I watched the Ten Commandments, I always thought to myself, and I think I mentioned it one time, and I can't remember who I was having the conversation with, but I remember as a young child that I was thinking, how did so if how could when we watch the movie Charlton Heston is white, and we've got all of these white Egyptians, or we've got all of these. You have all of these, white Egyptians. How would they not know that Moses was not theirs? Because that he would have looked different, and I think the mindset that I thought, because I was young and I really never really opened the Bible, and I was barely paying attention in Sunday school, and I definitely wasn't paying attention in service. So I didn't know that in actuality, the truth was that they knew that Moses was not the son of, they knew that he was not the son of, what's her name, or I forgot her name, but they knew that he wasn't the Pharaoh's daughter's, son. They knew he wasn't, an Egyptian. They knew he was different. So that is a direct contradiction of the movie, because in the movie they think that he's one of them. They think that he is, from the stock of, the royal family. And but in scripture we see that that's not how it was. So they could have easily known that he possibly, that maybe that he wasn't a Hebrew, but he would have had to look enough that they would have thought that he would have been Egyptian, because I'm pretty sure they would not have allowed him to be, um, that they would have not, if he was a Hebrew, they would not have allowed him to be in line, to be the next pharaoh of, Egypt. So I just always thought back to that. And another scripture that they use to say that, oh, the Hebrews are black, is because it all predicates on the Egyptians being black. And they also use the fact that, well, when Moses was kicked out of Egypt and he comes across the daughters of, what's his name, um, I forgot his name, but when he comes across, the ladies in the desert, they think that he's an Egyptian. And so they, for one, I'm like, okay, well, why would they possibly think that he's an Egyptian? Now, everyone, the automatic black Hebrew Israelite, or, Jesus black mindset is that, oh, because they were the same color. Now, to use a little bit of rational thought and reasoning, then we have to go back to, okay, well, what is it that I said about, or that we should know about Egypt? Well, Egypt was a very diverse nation. So just because someone looked a certain way, that didn't mean that we could say that this person was Egyptian. So why could they then say that he was Egyptian? Well, if he grew up in Egypt, if he was born in Egypt and grew up in Egypt, guess what he probably could have spoken? He probably was speaking Egyptian, especially if he lived amongst, the Egyptian, amongst the pharaoh in his court. They spoke Egyptian. Now, they probably would have spoken other languages as well, but as a first language, he most likely spoke Egyptian. So he probably was speaking Egyptian. He probably was also dressed like an Egyptian, because even then, people had a style of dress, just like here, now. People from different nations have a style of dress that they will, dress as. So even at that point in time, he also could have been, because he was dressed like an Egyptian. So the whole like myriad of things that just make zero sense because they can easily be explained. And I'm not saying that my reasons are 100% true and factual. I'm offering possible reasons that it's not based off of that it does not follow what the Black Hebrew Israelite mindset wants to push it as. It's all about looking at these things that happened, okay, and coming up with legitimate or logical reasons why they happened. And it can't just be, oh, because they were trying to blend in with this type of people. Oh, because they looked like this type of person. Because if we go and we look at, they say, okay, well, in Israel, okay, Israel was in Africa. And so, even though it's part of the Middle East, of what we call the Middle East now, it's in Africa. Traditionally, so they say, um, because of that, then he had to have been black. But the people around Jordan, and Lebanon and Syria, they weren't black. So why is it that these people from these nations could not be black? All right. But these people and these people have to be black. And, again, my whole issue is that I can't sit here and say what color Jesus was, what color the Hebrews are, because I don't know. And to me, honestly, based off of scripture, it does not matter. What my argument was, all right, and has been and will continue to be, until Christ comes back and he says, hey, this is the way that it is that, I made the argument with my ex's brother, okay? I'm not saying that he was not black or he was not this, but I'm saying that this scripture that you're using to say he is does not support that and does not say that he is black. So, it's that's my stance on the whole conundrum of, what the Hebrews looked like, what the true Jews look like, what Jesus looked like. I can't say. But what I can say is that the scriptures that the Hebrew Israelites bring up do not support that he was black. It's wishful thinking on their part, but it does not support the fact that he was black. And I don't even say it's wishful thinking, but it is gross twisting of scripture to support the narrative. So that's it. I just wanted to touch on this part, on this issue, this idea, because it kind of got me, a little not riled up, but it got me thinking about the whole, concept, drumming it all up, and I, wanted to kind of say my piece and bring this issue into a different light that people refuse to, or I would say that people refuse to, but it's just people don't really think about it. They want to, the pro black side, they look into it that, oh, he went to Egypt, so he had to blend in, and in order to blend in, he had to look like them, and Egyptians are black, and so they're looking at the whole reason of him going to Egypt, and everything was predicated to him hiding in the shadows so that people could not find them. And then the only way that they could have is that they could have found them was if they were another color. the only way they would have found him is if they looked like, if they did not look like everyone else. But we know that that's not how Egypt was. We also know that King Herod didn't even know that he was in Egypt, so he would have never gone to or thought to send people to go to Egypt. Also, he would not have dared sent his troops into Egypt to kill little kids, because it would have truly been the end of Israel at that moment. So that's me. This is Logan Orrin. What do you think about the concept? Leave it in the comment sections. Any complaints, questions, comments, leave them there. This is Logan Orrin, the Troll for Truth. Why? Because the truth should mean something.
Trolls roll out.